I just couldn't wait. I had to start without you, but I promise we can finish it together. The quilt you see behind me over there is Stargazer by Natalie Crabtree, and I'm a little starstruck. Let's get started. Oh, that is right. And are we going to all have fun together today? Welcome, everybody. My name is Rob Appell, National Sales Manager over at Michael Miller Fabrics, and official maker of fun right here at Making It Fun on YouTube. Stoked that you are all here to join me for another fabulous tutorial. Now, if you are not aware, Michael Miller Fabrics, michaelmillerfabrics.com, our website, has a fabulous page dedicated to free projects, free patterns, free downloads, all for you to enjoy out there. So you really can go to michaelmillerfabrics.com, and a few tabs over there is Get Inspired, and then you can scroll down and there's free downloads and there's free patterns and there's all kinds of different projects and stuff. Not only for quilting, but all kinds of different stuff out there. But of course, you know me, I'm a quilter. I love to make the quilt projects, and that's exactly where we are pulling this pattern from today. Now, it is from Natalie Crabtree. Thank you, Natalie. This one is awesome. And it's a perfect use of our new ombre fabrics called Refractions. Now, let me hold this up so you can see a little bit better what Refractions really is. It's awesome. Now, it comes in 12 colors, and you can see that our ombres, like we've been doing for the last couple of seasons, they go from dark to light all the way across the 45, which is really exciting. So you get a lot more color, a lot more transition. Now, I'm not sure if you can tell, but that little triangle right there is a metallic, so it's really fun. We have a little splash of glitz, a little something extra fun going on in there. So of course, this will work great with our fairy frost or our metallic pin dot or any of the other basics we have. We love working with our basics. So let me just flash you the colors here that we have available. And so here, of course, is my favorite card because I'm such a blue and green fan. But aren't those gorgeous? Now, we'll be using most of these colors today. And of course, we'll be using most of these colors today as well. Really cool in there. Isn't that beautiful? So those are the warm colors. Okay, and then we also have our awesome neutrals, and we'll be using some of these. And what we're really doing is we're using the refraction rolls, which is a pre-cut with the 2.5-inch strips already made for you. Plenty of fabric, plenty of strips available. And I'm going to follow the instructions to the letter if I can. You know me, I get a little distracted. However, one of the first things we need to do is we need to break down our roll. We need to use our pattern to identify the colors. All the colors are listed. And as you can see here, I've gone ahead and labeled the names on the selvages just with a Sharpie marker. Those are going to be chopped off pretty quick, but we do want to keep track of everything we're doing because Natalie has done a beautiful job of laying out the quilt in a gradient. Now, please don't freak out. If you're looking at this quilt and you're already looking at the pattern, and if you don't have the pattern yet, just go into the description. I've got a link for you, no problem. Here's the situation, kids. In order so you can see the stars on my design wall in this small little studio I have, I've actually flipped the quilt upside down. So your very top strip is the fuchsia color, so it goes from the fuchsia into the pumpkin, to the toffee, to the gold, the evergreen, and so on and so forth. But I've flipped the quilt over right now, even though I really had been working from the, well, top down, right, to keep all my colors in order. And I will walk you through both the construction of the stars and the constructions of the different 4 groups of strip sets we're making to make this all come together. So let's dive right into construction. But I just wanted to point out real quick, if you're feeling a little odd about the way this is laid out, you're right. It's upside down right now, but that's so you can see these awesome stars. And we're going to finish out a few rows together, and then I'll sew it all together and I'll hold it up and you can see the way it's supposed to look, and it's going to be awesome. So again, anyways, really excited that you're here. I'm going to slide those extra strips out of the way. I just wanted to show you, make sure we're labeling, make sure we're keeping track of what we're doing. Now we're going to start by building the star itself. This is what it looks like. If you've watched my other videos and you've been learning some of the terms, these are actually quarter square triangles, and it forms a 9 patch. So 1, 2, 3, 9 squares, super easy. And the very first step, I'm going to need a rotary cutter and a ruler, is we had 2 different size squares. The 3 and I believe these are quarter squares. These are going to be cut in half twice diagonally. I believe that's what the pattern says. Twice diagonally means we're going to do just this. I'm going to lay my ruler from corner to corner, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut through once, and before I move any fabric, I'm going to go ahead and just drop that on the opposite corners. move my body so that I'm safe. And now I'm going to go ahead and do that with the 3 1/4 squares as the pattern says, so that we can break that apart, and we'll use these over and over again with the other squares that were cut down to make our stars. So this is the first unit we're building now, the 1/4 square triangle. So you're going to have 2 of your darks. These came from the black fabric, and then the blue here is from the cobalt. Those were extra little cuts that we made early on. So like I said, we need 2 of the dark from the black strip we made, and then we're just going to pair 1 of each with a white and with a, there it is. How did I have to turn that like 400 degrees to get that just right? Anyways, so we're going to pair those together, and this is the way I like to do it in case you want a chain piece. It's how I handled my situation. Let's get that iron hot while I'm stalling out here. Take them, fold them over, edge to edge, and really what I want you to be worried about is that that straight edge and that straight edge line up. That's going to help you with your triangle piecing. We're going to do the same right here with our white and our black combo. And now I'm just going to head into the machine with my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm not even going to bother back stitching. I'm just going to go ahead and stitch down that straight edge first. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch down this straight edge now. And of course, I've made all of the other stars, so I knew how to set those up. But just make 1 to begin with, so you know which colors go on which sides. The pattern's very clear about that as well. And to go ahead and, like I said, you can chain piece all of the triangle units together to start. Cut them open. And now we're going to press to the dark side. So my iron got hot while I was stalling. Hold up the black fabric in the air, right, like this, so that you're pressing into that color. And if you do that with all of your triangles, it will really help the seams come together nicely and nest here as we get ready to build those units like that. And you can see that's going to allow everything to flip and flop seam allowance wise as we need. Okay. So now we're just going to bring this over, double check to make sure that you actually have the darks on opposite sides. And we're going to flip these over like this. Go ahead and line the seam up so that you can find those opposite edge seams right there, folded in opposite directions or pressed in opposite directions. Line them up, anchor them together. Come on back over here to your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And piece these 2 groups of triangles together now to make a square. And at this point, you have dark on both sides, so I like to kind of press into the side that does not have the white triangle. So I'm pressing into the cobalt and the black piece. And then the next thing, and this isn't really a requirement, but I've kind of gotten in the habit of doing it with my half square triangle. So now I've started doing it with all of the units, which is really trimming it back down to the accurate size. So we're shooting for a 2.5 inch square right now. And if you have seen me do it with the triangles, it's going to be, or the half square triangles, it's going to be very similar. Same way, I'm going to use a diagonal mark, the 45-degree diagonal mark on my ruler. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to line that line up right along the seam that was created. And hopefully I'm past 2.5 and past 2.5 here. So what I'm going to first do is just cheat a little. So I have just the littlest bit of fabric hanging over, and I'm going to shave off that first edge. And I don't know if you noticed, but I start in the middle of the ruler and pull towards the corners of the ruler. Now that that's been done, I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees, or 180 degrees. I don't know how else to say that. Sorry, guys. I love my numbers. You know me. Now, here's the key. Line up first the diagonal on the seam allowance. Find your edges right at your 2.5 marks. And now you're going to go ahead and cut again and cut again. And what that has done is it's really squared it up beautifully. It's still 2.5 inches just as we want it, but now all of our points and angles and edges are nice. And we're going to go ahead and start to build out our star block units, and you're going to need 10 of these. Now the fun part in the star units, just like in the rest of the quilt, is we're playing with the gradient of color. So the instructions have asked you to cut your black strip into lots of grays, light grays, dark grays, medium grays, and blacks. And then this is how we kind of control like the darkest black going through the lighter black centers. And you also pair those with the darker black edges that you've made. So once you've made all of these groupings, I'm not even sure if you can see, but we have slightly different shades that keep happening because you are working along an ombre or a variegated fabric. In order to put together this 9 patch, super easy, you just first have to pay attention to make sure that the cobalt blue pieces from the units we just built, our quarter square triangles, are now going to touch into our black square, and then the rest of the cornerstones, or the 9 patch, are going to be formed with our solid white units just like this. Okay, so let's take a moment, sew this all together, and I'm just going to start by piecing into, and again, we can do strip piecing as well, or chain piecing. So I'm just folding over onto the center block, center unit. So as I do one, and you've seen me do this before if you've watched my other videos, and if you haven't, please subscribe to the channel and join us every Wednesday for something fun, whether it's a shop tour or a project video or something, maybe a quilting contest or something fun like we've started doing. Let's keep folding those. So the black center sews to the cobalt fabric, the lighter sides of the cobalt fabric, I should say. Yep. And then the white pieces sew to the dark edges. Really fun. Okay, so I now made all 3 of those while I was just chatting away over here. I'm going to use my machine to cut those loose. And now as we go over to the iron, once again, I'm going to press into the patchwork to try to keep the white true, not get the bleed through, and also allow for that same kind of nesting. So this takes a little more effort because I've got piecing going on. So I am going to do it before I sew on the other sides of our blocks. So you're pressing into the patchwork. And now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and quickly sew on these last squares and then marry these rows together. Oop, that looked kind of odd. There you go. Here's your check. Remember, you're sewing this lighter side of the cobalt fabric to the black center square on all 4 sides. Okay, let's get this done. Now that those other squares have been stitched on, I have to rotate the unit. So again, I'm pressing back into the patchwork on both sides. Maybe you can see what that looks like from over there. And again, what that is doing for us is just making our seam allowances come together ever so nicely, because you can see now they're going to be going in the opposite directions of each other. And you're not completely in the design clear yet. So please make sure that you slow down and you make sure that your cobalt refractions fabric is touching into the black again. Technically, you could have accidentally rotated that, right? So just pay attention, make sure you've got all your colors lined up, and go row on top of row. And we're going to stitch these together. Let's take a moment and press out these edges, and I just press both outer edges away from center. Hit it with a little steam. Let it just chill, because you've maybe heard me say fabric has memory, and we want our squares to look nice and crisp as they sit there like that. So I'm just going to let that cool as we go. And if you're like me, you're following the pattern to the letter. So you've created 10 of these stars, and as a reminder, you have some that are darker looking and some that are lighter looking, both in the centers and in their outside edges. So what I then did is I took and I stacked them all from dark to light, so then when I went to put them back into the project, I knew where to place each one. If you look at the pattern cover, actually the stars themselves start light on the outside edges and work towards dark in the middle. Remember, this is the top of the quilt, and that's a light star. If you can see it behind my cool cabinet there, another light star there going towards the darker. This is near the middle of the quilt right now. Okay, so we've got our stars built, we've got all 10 of them ready to rock and roll. Now we're going to go ahead and start building out the units, such as this, to put our stars within. Okay, when it gets all finished, you'll have basically a unit of strip set with color and white, then a star, and then a unit of strip set with color and white. But they don't all have the color in the center. So we're going to build, or discuss at least, both styles of groupings. And we have 4 new cuts, 4 new measurements, and they were given to you in the second page of the cutting instructions. So I've got them written across the room so I don't mess them up. I'm going to not use the numbers so that I don't get them wrong from this point on. But I will tell you while I'm looking at my cheat sheet. Okay, so the really long ones are going to use 2 colors and a white in the center, and they're going to be 37 3/4. Then we have the shortest piece on the other side, which then becomes 7 1/4. The next groupings are 2 whites with a color in the middle. Okay, these are like medium in length. You notice the star is shifted, so it's shorter. 37 3/4 we're up here, so we're at 31 3/4 here with a 13 1/4. So those are the 4 sizes: 7 1/4, 13 1/4, 37 3/4, 31 3/4, and it's all written in the pattern instructions, which you've downloaded for free at michaelmillerfabrics.com. Yay, it's a win-win. Okay, now let's build these. And when we build these, we definitely need to pay attention. So I've left one of the more challenging, the 2 color and the single white strips to build. And we're going to be using our gold and our toffee. And the way that it comes together is that your star sits in the light transition within the group. So we used a couple of different stars to cut these. I shouldn't say stars. I've used a couple of different strips to cut these, and it goes toffee on the top here, dark to light, and then I'm going to do gold below it, same thing, dark to light. The Cotton Couture bright white is a solid, so it just goes right there. Okay, then when I get to the other side, let's just scoot this a little bit so you can see it. We'll sew it all together here in a moment. What we need to make sure we do is the toffee again on top, and you can choose where you cut your pieces. So you might want to cut your short pieces in a little bit of the lighter section of your strips. I made mine a little dark, and you see that in the transition here, but I'd already cut up all my strips, so that's what I had. And that's the fun about being a quilter, is we just work with what we've got, right? Okay, so now over here, same thing, the gold, but remember, it's light to dark. So dark to light, light to dark. The star itself will sit right here in the middle of that transition because the star is creating the light, and that is how you'll all remember that. So my white will go right here. Let's start with the easy side. I'm going to take one of my toffees and my white fabric, and I'm just going to put them together. Make sure I got the right seam allowance going into the machine. Let's do that again. And I'll do the same thing chain piecing style here, is I'll just go ahead, put the white on top of the toffee, because I like to look at the second part, the next piece I'm adding on. And we'll just chain piece this on too. If you've never sewn strips together like this without using pins, now keep in mind, I've got a wonderful Juki sewing machine here. That does a lot of the work for me, but I'm not pushing, I'm not pulling, I'm not water skiing. I just have a nice little pace going here on the machine. I've set my machine for a 2mm stitch length instead of a 2.5. And when I get about halfway down my strip, I do just take a moment and I come down here to the very end. I match up my corners, because you know fabric will give a little bit, right? I line up my edges, make sure everything's just as nice as possible, because I want to use every thread in this strip. And now I'm just going to go ahead and finish it off. So that's kind of my no pin method. It doesn't always work perfect, but it works pretty great. And I'll tell you, having this high density Cotton Couture makes for really great sewing. I often forget that because I use so much Michael Miller fabrics that I forget what a great base cloth we use, and it makes our sewing really nice. We don't get the distortion and the warp and the fray and all that nonsense. So anyways, here we go, and you can see I'm actually going to come right down to that corner with very little effort and basically a perfect matchup. Let's cut those threads. And again, we're gonna press between each phase as we go, because we really want these to turn out nice and clean. So I'm just gonna move my purple parts we've already pre-made for us. We'll discuss those in a minute. And then I'm going to come over here and get myself a nice long working section for my ironing board. And we're going to always press these strips into the print or into the refractions fabric itself. So in order to do that right now, I've got my light. Oops, I said that wrong. We always put our dark fabric in the air. So I've got my dark fabric in the air, using my iron to set that thread, set that seam first as I go. Then I fold it over with the iron, press it out nice and beautiful. Very easy. And we'll do the same for the small piece. Pressing into the dark fabric, sewing the strips on the other side. Now on the other side of the white, you really can't get it wrong at this point because you took the time to get it right when you started. But just make sure when you come around here that you have grabbed the light side of your next piece and it's on the same edge as the light side of your first piece. And then head on into that sewing machine and put it together with that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And as you have your third strip on, again, just go ahead and always be pressing into your print fabric. So pressing away from your white fabrics. And even when we build the rows, like you see in the quilt, we do this exact same thing. We're just always pressing into the print. And these strips, because you pre-cut them, they're already the exact sizes you need. So that's all we have to do is we just have to get those sizes pre-cut. And like I said, it's in the instructions, very easy to follow. Just take your time. Okay, and then once everything is all pressed and nice and clean, let's go ahead and just finish this particular row right now by inserting our star. So I'm just going to rotate it. As a reminder, I want my star to go right into my lightest spot. And let's see, I'm going to need this one here because this particular grouping is, actually I want my a little bit lighter because this is the second from the bottom row. So this one was lighter than this one. Remember, the lights are near the bottom and the top in the project. And then again, as we rotate this here, I just want to make sure we're going dark to light into the star, out to the lights again. Now I'm just going to fold this over and match up those seam allowances here. And I happen to be fortunate that I had that star rotated so my seams nest. And we're going to just drop that presser foot. And again, for something like this, I'm going to sew the star onto the short end of the group of color. Once that's on, I'm just bringing it right back over here, double checking to make sure I've got it all just as I need. And I'm going to flop this over and we're going to put this row together as well. Okay, so our star is now in one of our rows that has, gosh, that looks nice, doesn't it? The two different color banks there, okay? And so as I get ready to press this, I'm just gonna press away from the star and now into the rows themselves, or the strip set rows, maybe we should call those. So that side into the short strip set row, this side by holding it up into the long strip set row. Okay. And so we have that completely built with a 2-color single white. I need to make one more row, so I say we just do it together. That's my beautiful purple here. And so these ones were the 31 3/4. Oh, I did it. And the 13 1/4. And as a reminder, same thing. I just want you to all really pay attention that we have our lights touching into each other, that you've taken the time to organize your stars dark to light. And I'm just going to match these guys up real quick. And we're going to go ahead and get this piece put together. I'm going to kind of sew around that little bit of a bow. If you notice that in the star edge, I should trim it, but I'm just going to sew around it. Meaning I'm just going to go straight across here. So you see that seam allowance got a little wide from the bottom piece. No problems. Match up my corners. Grab this side over here. Okay, and there we now have a star inside of one of our single color rows like that. Let's do the same thing for our ironing. We're just going to iron into the rows away from the star. Mostly because it's just easier on that star. Okay, so now that's perfect there. And I actually just, in arm's reach, happen to have the other portion of the quilt. So let me show you how we can sew the rows together, and then we can wrap it up for the day and let you all get back onto the projects you're also working on as well. So I've come down here, I've got into my pumpkin. The one that touches the pumpkin here, I need to have it be my toffee color. So let me just make sure I'm really focused here for a second. Bring this around, and the other way you'll know that is the stars are all on one side. And the other important thing, the most important thing I should probably mention real quick, is the way that these stars are going to match up in the seam allowance right here. So as I lay these things right sides together, yes, the first concern is going to be match up that very front corner that you're going to sew through, but then I'm also looking for the union right back here where the stars come together, because that's going to be another one of those nice seams that I can just make sure I match those points up, and that'll help everything stay accurate as we go. So now we're sewing together the big bank of rows that we've created. So create all your rows first. And again, with our 1/4 inch seam allowance, a nice pace, I'm just going through. And now as I approach into that first star, I'm going to take a moment. Of course, you could also take a straight pin. That's what they're for, or some of those wonder clips. And now I'm just going to line up down here, which was where my union of the two stars met up. Now I'm just going to sew a few more inches through here, making sure that my rows stay nice and I catch all the parts of my stars. If you can see the tips of your stars down in there, try not to stitch them into your seam allowance. Try to keep them right on the edge of that seam allowance so you have nice pretty points. And then same thing, when I get down to about halfway through, I'm just going to come down to the very end. I'm going to match up those corners, make sure they're nice and even, pull a little tension on my fabric, line everything up perfect, and I'm just going to keep on sewing. Okay, so now that that part is on, same thing. We'll go over to the ironing surface. Let's go ahead and move our purple parts out of the way. I'm going to set it so that as I go to press it, I'm going to press up into the refractions fabric, away from my white seam allowance. And we just do this with each row as we go. Like I said, just keep pressing into your refractions fabrics, into your printed fabrics as you add on each row as you go. And pretty quickly, you'll have this awesome quilt. Let me hold it up right for you this time. Let's see, I believe it starts with our fuchsia at the top. That's right. There it is. Oh, wow, that's amazing. And I just absolutely love how Natalie did this amazing coloration using our gradient fabric, the refractions ombre. Super fun, super cool. Maybe some of you saw this in one of the shop tour videos. I was visiting out in Wyoming recently, Common Threads. The gals in there had this quilt up on the wall, and they had all of these wonderful fabrics. So maybe if you're looking for the fabrics, you should reach out to Common Threads. Anyways, been very, very inspired by this awesome Stargazer quilt. I absolutely love the use of the fabric and the way you laid out the pattern, Natalie, so I just want to say thank you very, very much. I'd also like to say a special thank you to our mystery guest today, and that would be the gentleman or lady out there in the giant work truck in my front yard who continually fired up the motor every time I tried to speak today. So if you heard that weird rumbling in the background, I'm sorry. There was some massive commotion going out on the street out in front of me, and it seemed like every time I started to speak, they started to run their heavy equipment. So I do apologize if the audio is a little weird, but the nice thing is we'll be back real soon with another video, and we'll see what happens then, and I'll see all of you another time right here at Making It Fun. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. Wow, you are still there. Thanks for sticking with me till the end of the video. I know, I get a little long-winded sometimes. But if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you check out a few of the other ones we've created. I think they're terrific. And of course, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the little bell to be notified. I don't want you to miss a moment of the fun. Stay safe and happy sewing.